Hello, my name is Andy Smith, and I'd like to welcome you to this three-part series of the World of Working Memory and Words that was designed for the 2022 CMI Broadcast Conference, Words for the World, Read and Respond. I begin this series with a deep appreciation for these two men who happen to share the same birth year. My husband, Dr. Carol Smith, who has dedicated his life to making the work of Charlotte Mason available to the world, and also to Dr. Russell Barkley, who has dedicated his life to making the science of ADHD accessible to all. A due respect for the personality of children propels us to understand the Lees and Leahs among us, those who of any age live with the challenge of lower working memory capacity, because we want to help them learn to develop the competence to conduct their own lives. This is an overview of the three-part series. And this first time, we're going to be thinking about working memory and self-control. And then we're going to apply that to the academic settings of working memory and narration and working memory and comprehension. Part one of this series is going to lay a foundational understanding of working memory. We think of working memory as those processes that we have for information processing, and then what gives us guidance for more complex behavior. We're going to do just a very brief overview. Then we're going to look at working memory as it relates to self-control, especially the nonverbal working memory. And then we're going to look at some strategies. There are substantial differences between individuals in working memory capacity. And these differences are highly stable over time, and they appear to be a core cognitive trait for the person. And like many human traits, working memory can be represented on a bell curve. Now, this working memory, this might be a new concept to the Mason community, but the subject of working memory and individual differences, it's ubiquitous in cognitive psychology research. So think of working memory capacity as along a continuum. And there's Mel or Matt, that's the average typical working memory capacity. And we consider, what medium capacity Meg or high capacity Hal can do. We want to make sure that we don't export expectations from them onto what Lee can do. So let's learn about working memory, shall we? Now, I've used this slide in past presentations to show how we hold and manipulate information in working memory. But this needs updating. We need to be careful. We don't want to think of working memory as a passive storage shell for space in our cognitive architecture. Working memory is a cluster of very active, interrelated cognitive processes that we use in the control, regulation, and active maintenance of task-relevant information. Now, do you know what the big component of working memory that's missing from this slide? It's attention. Attention, which is a cornerstone of working memory processes. And in many situations, working memory could easily be thought of as working attention. So that's why I put those scissors in there to show manages interference. It cuts out. It's the attentional control aspect where we use working memory to cut away task irrelevant distractions. Now, you don't have to read this slide now. I just know many of you, if you've studied Mason for years, this might be a little different concept than what you've read in her work. So I'm just including a few slides for any of you. You want to go back, you want to read it later. And if you're not interested in all these neurological underpinnings, you can just pass on reading these. I just want you to know I have spent hundreds of hours, literally hundreds of hours, reading all the current research about working memory so that you all could have the top robust science. Because you will want, if you've studied Mason, you have a template that you have imported, and you will need the new science to help you adjust or to modify that template. And Mason herself kept up with science, and it was towards the end of her life that she said she had emphasized habits too much in home education. So we're just keeping in step with her, keeping up with science. So today's science reminds us, yes, there are substantial differences among us in how well, how efficiently, how effortlessly we're going to do things like sustain our attention and problem solve. And so the Lees and the Leahs of this world, they're going to have particular deficits in attention control processes compared to the high capacity Hows. And so here, the high capacity Hope or high capacity Hows, they are going to be better at controlling aspects of their attention. This is a working memory. This is a research terminology to actively maintain goal-relevant information in order to successfully perform a task. They're going to be better at that than the low-capacity Lees and Leahs. But no matter where we are on this working memory capacity continuum, all of us have various information that's coming at us we have to deal with. Now think, because high capacity Hal, because he can hold more of these varied bits of info in mind, because he can reshuffle and order all this mental information, he's going to be able to process much more quickly and much more efficiently than our lower capacity Lees and Leahs. In his mind's eye, his working memory capacity, he can see what's important, what isn't, what's extraneous mental noise, that just needs discarding. He can see what he needs to be doing, what he doesn't. And if he gets interrupted in what he's doing, he doesn't get derailed because his working memory reminds him what he's supposed to be doing. That's that goal relevant information. It's just right there. He mentally recalibrates, gets back on track. Now, do you know that failure to re-engage a goal, that's working memory dysfunction? And remember, for Hal, all this mental juggling, it just happens naturally, instantaneously. So it doesn't feel burdensome. It's not going to drain him. All this is happening below consciousness, or it's happening automatically. So it's no surprise that research tells us that the Hals of this world are going to be much more likely to succeed in the classroom and on the job. And Mason saw a high capacity Hal, and she elegantly described him as an adult. And I'm going to read you the description on the next slide and see if you can pick up how much prioritizing is implied in her description. So the trained professional man, listens to a roundabout story, throws out the padding, seizes the facts, sees the bearing of every circumstance, and then puts the case with new clearness and method. But if we look now at limited capacity Leah, her neural working memory mechanisms, they just don't allow her to hold and juggle all these pieces of mental info, keep it online. So when she goes to sort, what's important, what do I need to be doing, what am I not supposed to be doing, everything, it's all just this blur to her. It's all in a fog. And so it's easy to see how Lees and Leahs are going to frequently struggle with feeling overwhelmed. Now, who are the Lees and Leahs of the world? Let's see who struggles, who lives with limited working memory. So, in the general population, 1 out of 10 of us lives with the challenge of limited working memory. But if we're students with learning disorders, that number climbs now to 2 to 5 out of 10. And then if we're in the ADHD group, well, it's just all of us, because working memory is just a core ubiquitous challenge for us. Now, there are going to be different diagnoses that will impact working memory performance, but here's the thing, they impact it in different ways. There are different underlying neural mechanisms. And for this series, our discussion is going to really be confined to the working memory challenges that originate with ADHD. So if we ever hope to understand the Lee and Leahs of our lives, we want to give due respect for their personalities. If we want to do this, we have to put on our neurological lens and not our character lens. And we know, in Mason's era, the only lens available was the character lens and moral habits. But it will be important to clarify what is a deficit in Lee and Leah's physiology, because it's all too easy to just interpret that as a deficit in character. And to make dysregulation, we can mistake dysregulation for disobedience. Weakness in skill, weakness in will. Well, to see how working memory relates to self-control, let's start with a theological perspective, and then we're going to translate that down into a psychological one. So here we see in the Genesis 1 view of reality, we see that the infinite personal triune God made human beings in his image and thereby differentiated us from the rest of creation. And in that, he also assigned us a finite rulership. That rulership is rooted in our capacity for I amness. So God identified himself to Moses as I am that I am. And we who bear his image also have an I amness, or a sense of self about us, which animals just do not possess. And this differentiation can clearly be seen in how humans and animals respond to events in the environment. So a human now, we can stand back from the immediacy of experience in the way that a fox just cannot. A fox sees a mouse or a hen, pounces on it. It can only respond reactively or reflexively. The fox has no capacity for conceptual thought. Animals are locked into this stimulus response model. But not so for us humans. When something happens, we don't need to just immediately react, but we have this gift, this conceptual thought, so we can stand back to consider and stand back. And in this considering, we can choose our response. And we see that it is in this stepping back that we have the capacity for self-rulership. And now I'm going to show you how working memory is a huge, huge part of what helps us to step back. So self-rulership now, it first begins with actions that we direct back to the self instead of towards the event. Why? Why do we direct actions back at ourselves? And the answer here, again, it involves a unique human capacity. It's because we can conceptualize a future that we want, and then we can organize our behavior over time to get to this future. Imagining an outcome, conceptualizing a future, it's not something animals can do. So we can imagine future outcomes, then we adjust our behavior. We take all these little action steps that little by little are going to get us to that future. Take note, whenever we deal with time, we're dealing with working memory. So that imagined future can be 30 minutes away. I got to set the table before I can go out and play ball. It can be 30 days away. Oh, I have to eat fruit instead of pizza because I got to fit into my, jeans. Or it can be 3 years away. Like, I'm saving my money because I'm going to buy a horse. But do you see now how these images that we hold in our minds about a hypothetical future, how these are going to impact our actions to the self right now, right what we're doing in the present? And think, here we go. Time, working memory, self-rulership, we can call it self-control, self-regulation. They're all woven together. And you can see, when you think of self-control, how using mental pictures of something we want in the future is going to help us delay gratification. It's going to help us pass on the immediate, the small rewards right now, because we're going to hold out for the larger, for the more delayed rewards in the future. And now I want to tell you something about this visual imagery system. It's called the nonverbal working memory. And think of the nonverbal working memory as our mind's theater or our mind's eye. It's our ability to resense or to re-see to ourselves all our past experiences. And this is info we hold in mind. It's not through words. It's not through me saying, okay, Andy, you got to pass on the pizza, girlfriend. Stay away from that. But rather, it's information that we hold in mind through our senses. And it's pictures of what we've seen or what we've heard, what we've smelled, touched, tasted, so forth. So think about, in his mind's theater, Luis is going to be able to re-see, re-sense to himself, all his buddies out scrambling on the field for the ball. And he's going to be able to rehear his mother reminding him that he's going to be grounded for the day if he doesn't get to his chores. And Marie can, she can resense how tight those jeans felt. And she can rehear her friends all chatting about, these super cool jeans. And this vast array of resensing of our past events. You can think of them as ideas. This generates an internal stream of information in our mind's eye that we can use to change our behavior right now, to change our choices here in the present, because we have a future, a goal, something we want to get. So Luis can see himself running down the field towards that ball. He's going to get that kick in, and he doesn't want to jeopardize missing that. So he hops up on his chores. And Marie, she can see her skinnier self and her designer jeans, or up on the horse, I don't know, in the spring meadow. Or Mark's, when Mark's fraternity brothers want him to skip Thursday and Friday classes and say, come with us to go to a skiing trip. It's going to be his working memory that's going to help him pass on that offer, because he knows that he's always loved stars. He's always loved space. He wants this degree. He wants to graduate because he wants to go work for NASA. So, working memory, self-control, and time. Now, let's go on. When we think that how resensing our past experiences to ourselves and our working memory, that's going to help us learn to sense and judge the flow of time, and also to manage ourselves relative to time. All right, now think about how a sense of time develops. Think about kids, all the different scenes that they hold in their mind's theater. There's all the bedtime routines. You put on your jammies, you read a story, or when the snows, when it's snowing, there's all this time you need to bundle up before you go out. Or it can be something like every Saturday, Mom makes waffles. That's our family's big breakfast. So think, children are amassing all these images, all these past experiences. And then as they refer back to them over and over again, they are developing a sense of how time flows, how time progresses. What you do for bedtime, family dinners, wash-up routines, feeding the dog, so forth. In replaying these events in their minds, they learn to see, how much time has passed, or how long it takes to put their clothes on, or put their toys away, or, whatever, finish their task. And they are learning, little by little, they are learning to manage themselves relative to time. Working memory, time, self-control. Barclay says that that this capacity to sense time and judge its flow and manage oneself relative to it is one of the key things for academic and occupational success. Now, think about this. If there's no time involved, well, what's the need for self-control? So here's Dad and little Leah at the mall. They're passing by the pizza shop. And if Leah says, "Oh, can we get a slice pizza?" And Dad says, "Yeah, great idea." Little Leah doesn't need any self-control. But now insert the time factor. Dad says, "No, honey, can't today." "Oh, but Dad, that's my favorite. That's pepperoni and sausage." But Dad reminds Leah of the anticipated future. We got to get home. Mom's got a nice dinner waiting for us. So to help her manage the disappointment, no pizza, well, what images might pop to her mind? Maybe the good smells, family dinners, eating, laughing together out on the patio. Will that remind her of the benefit of going home? Or previous times of, maybe she's tried to bargain with Dad and discovered he always sticks to his guns. Do these come to mind? You can see her nonverbal working memory, her mind's theater, her mind's eye, are going to be part of her self-regulatory mechanisms that are going to help her override this immediate reaction of disappointment and avoid pitching a fit and having a crying meltdown. Self-control is what bridges the time lapse between an event, our response, and an outcome. And just think, if I don't have a sense of tomorrow, well, then I just get caught up in the immediacy of the moment. I don't have any need to adjust my present actions because I'm just sort of stuck or locked into this reacting to whatever I happen to be seeing or hearing, or I'm talking with, whatever I'm feeling. So you can see that working memory, what we hold in mind, plays a massive part in our self-regulation, self-rulership capacities. And note, the longer the spans between an event, a response, and an outcome, the more self-control is needed. So you can think of the nonverbal working memory like a GPS that can get us to the future we want, gives us a tool of foresight which is just, again, bringing to mind our destination, where we want to get to, our hypothetical future, and then seeing the route to reach it, to get there. In our working memory, in our mind's eye, we can see the consequences of our actions. We can adjust our present behavior. We're going to the beach this summer. No, I don't want to spend money at Taco Bell and Pizza Hut. I'm going to save it, because we're going to have a great time. When you get off track, the GPS reroutes you, right? So we use our working memory also. We see ourselves relative to our goals, and that's going to help us have this sense of awareness, to self-question, to self-monitor. How are we doing? Are we getting where we need to be going? Need to make any kind of mid-course corrections. So people with poor working memory often have a poor awareness of themselves, again, in relation to their goals. Nonverbal working memory gives us the ability for hindsight. That's hugely important, because we re-see past relevant experiences that we need to make decisions to help us right now. Luis, no chores done, no playing ball. If I spend money at Taco Bell, I'm not going to be able to save it. I got a ticket when I was driving in this neighborhood. I'm not going to be speeding in that neighborhood again. And if you look at hindsight, you can think of, there's imitation and there's also vicarious learning. So imitation is learning from other people's successes, because you're going to copy them. So if my house is, if I find a mouse or mice in my linen drawers, and I can think, neighbor Dave, well, he was telling me about Borkin coming by, and I'm going to call Dave and ask him if that's a good idea. Vicarious learning is learning from the mistakes of others. I remember when my other neighbor poured gas down the hole in his yard to get rid of mice or rats, and what a mess that was. So hindsight gives you an ability not to have to go through this grind of learning everything, trial and error, by yourself, but you can benefit from learning from the mistakes of others. So let's just review how the nonverbal working memory system guides us. Gives us hindsight, foresight, helps with our self-awareness. It helps us learn to defer gratification, develop a sense of time. And I will mention to you the next time about expanding time horizons. You can see what a very powerful tool this is. And ADHD is going to disrupt all of those. We'll talk more about that later. So we have to put on our neurological lens, and we have to see, and have to remember, Mason's era, the only lens available was the moral lens. But we have our neurological lens. And so when you think, Lee, don't you ever think before you do something so stupid? Don't you ever think before you act? And you think, no, Lee cannot activate this vast array of past experiences to help him in this moment. His neurological resensing mechanisms are fairly primitive. It's not that he doesn't rethink, pardon me, it's not that he doesn't think before he acts, but he doesn't resense before he acts. Leah, this happens to you every time. You always get backed up into this corner. Leah, you always end up dating these kind of, I don't know, jerk fellas. You're always late. It's like, don't you ever learn? But Leah's hindsight and her capacity for vicarious learning were so weak that she just doesn't, she's not able to learn from the, well, from her own mistakes or the mistakes of others. Lee, you are so selfish. You owe me rent. You got your stimulus check and you went out and you blew it on the iPhone. And you think, Lee he just has little foresight. He's not able to hold all these past images in mind, or enough of them to be able to see patterns developing. So he's not going to be good at predicting what's coming next. He's not going to be able to get ready for it. Leah, you told me you do this. I mean, we talked about this. I think you're just disrespectful. I think you're just disobedient. But Leah can't hold in mind all these past dialogues, so she forgets her promises. She says things and doesn't follow through with them. So I've tried to give you now, and this is really just a quick overview of how working memory supports self-control, to show you how we're always adjusting our actions, but it's always with an eye towards our future. And you think, what is at risk if we don't help Lee and Leah steward the neurocognitive architecture they've been given? If we don't help them learn how to stand back from the immediacy of experience, the immediacy of themselves and the world, what will their futures be? So now let's go on to some basic principles, some basic core foundational things that are going to help support those with limited working memory. And these principles apply pretty much across the board in terms of ages. First thing is we have to create an atmosphere of compassionate curiosity. Basically, there's got to be a safe place where it's okay to screw up. There's not heavy judgment. People now call it a growth mindset. But I'll tell you, when Lee and Leah are adults and they go to counselors or ADHD coaches, they're going to tell them, well, let's see what works for you. And they're going to tell them, let's keep your curiosity alive. We don't want it doused in shame. And let's try this. We have to keep this experimental mindset, this curious experimenting. Let's try this, see if this works. If that doesn't work, let's try another. I think Ross Green does a good job of helping parents understand this atmosphere of compassionate curiosity. And the other thing we have to get in our minds is you just can't rely on working memory as a source of self-control. So this is how I see it. What's the most compelling message impacting what I do? And as we grow throughout childhood, look how our working memory capacities, they're going to increase. That's frontal lobe brain maturation. And so you're going to see this shift. You're shifting away from, in terms of what's controlling or what's guiding or directing your behavior. You're shifting away from the now, the immediate, the external environment, and you're shifting more towards the internalized, the working memory, the mental information. Now, ADHD disrupts this development, but we'll get to that in another session. So for high capacity Hal, his internal, his invisible world, strong enough to support, to direct his self-control. For the Lees and Leahs of the world, their working memory is just, it's too weak to support the self-regulation they need. The Lees and Leahs are what we call visual field dependent, or really just field dependent. What is in their visual field is what is going to capture them and what's going to pull them along. Or, you can think of what they're hearing, but mostly you think they are field dependent. What is right now is going to be what's pulling them. And so if the immediate is so influential, then we need to become very aware of what might be in their immediate environment, what's going to be competing for their attention, especially when it's a cognitively demanding task. For an adult, that can be paying the bills. For a kid, it can be doing a narration, a written narration. I know this is going to be a particular challenge when you think of homeschool families, all the siblings and pets about. But you have to remember, Lee and Leah cannot just automatically filter out distractions. And those distractions, they can be external ones. It can be people chatting outside, or it can be siblings playing in another room. Or it can be internal ones, internal distractions, worrying about your sick pet or getting excited about a friend's upcoming birthday. It can be like an adult described this as a virus that gets into your hard drive and just eats up the space. So this is something for you to come back to, just some practical suggestions on ways to minimize distractions there. A core underlying principle is you just have to make the invisible visible. That right there is the basis for these strategies. So what you're going to do is you're going to structure the now to foster self-control. You're not going to depend on the internal working memory world. So you're going to make remembering visible or audible. And you're going to get remembering out of your head. So you're going to use charts for everything, list, Post-its, alarms, timers. You're going to put it out in the environment. Now, obviously, that means schedules and directions and expectations have to be posted in the visual field where kids see them, right? But you want to put reminders, what they call the point of performance, where you have to do this task. So I had some foot problems. The doc told me I had to do these calf exercises. You lean against the wall. Oh, don't depend on working memory to remind you to do this 4 times a day. So you put the Post-it note, I put it on my bathroom door because that's where I can lean against the wall to do it, right there in my visual field. that strategy, making remembering visible, that red that's on the thumbnail. I thought this was so clever. This comes from Jeff Copper, an ADHD coach. He had a client that was all the time texting his kids with text he later regretted. And so making the remembering visible, put the little red on his thumbnails. When you go to text, look at that red will pop up and remind you, stop, pause, think about that. And in the fella's cell phone, the various kids, they were renamed pause 1, pause 2, and pause 3. So when he was going to text them, pause 1 would show up. So you see, it's all about making remembering visible, taking it out of your head. And there's so many different wonderful ideas. You can go to attitudemag.com. They'll show you some. Here's just an idea. You will want to break down multi-step task into bite-sized chunks. Just think, you can't hold all of those tasks that need to be done on your working memory. And so one clever mom, she put together this, it's a whiteboard. And this is a system she designed for morning routines. Here's the magnetic whiteboard. She made all these magnets, all the different tasks her kids need to do before they leave for school. And the kids knew that they had to do their magnets before they ate breakfast. And do you see? Here's working memory. It's externalized. And I encourage you to read more. She explains her whole system. But think about, I have to have the bathroom cleaned before I leave so that my sibling can come in. All right. That list can be put on the back of a door, bathroom door. You make remembering and visible, and you make small chunks, small doable chunks. You make the passage of time external and visible. You use countdown timers and clocks. That's going to optimize self-regulation. So you have to wear wristwatches. Don't depend on cell phones. Wristwatches. You have a clock in every room. Eric Tivers, he's an ADHD coach. In his office, he has a clock on every wall. And you have to start using planners. Children have to, especially when they go away to college. It's a subject way too extensive to get into right now. But that will be a key part of their success. Another thing is you use a body double. This is going to make motivation external. You're going to help kids and adults. A body double is just somebody that's there with you. You just get more oomph. Kids with limited working memory are going to do better when they are around others, if they narrate in a pair, if they're sitting with a parent, and being alone, being away, being by yourself, which is pushing you back into your mental information working memory world, it's much, much harder. The folks with working memory challenges are going to need more check-ins. There's so much to say, but let me just wrap this up. Okay, what we've seen is individuals there's significant individual differences in working memory. That attentional control is part of working memory. We saw how the nonverbal working memory is used for self-regulation. And we've given some basic strategies that are going to help support the limited Lees and Leahs in our world. And they're all going to somehow use the external world to support the remembering, to support the self-regulation that we need. So thank you. I will see you next time, and we will get into working memory as it relates to narration. I hope this was helpful.